It sounds like the breath work that was like the missing ingredient for you. Like
It
you
was.
you had the diet, you had the exercise, you had all the things, but there was like this missing piece.
Yes, and it
You
was
know,
my nervous system, yes, and then it was
right.
also my thoughts, right? Because I knew that I was worthy. I knew I was enough. I knew all these things, but it wasn't in my how could it be in my heart? How could I be embodying these things? Because I wasn't in my body.
Welcome to the Blueprint Breakers podcast. What is a blueprint breaker? If you live your life outside the typical traditional lifestyle blueprint, you are a blueprint breaker. We are here to start a conversation, to assemble resources, and to build a community. This podcast is for empowered women in midlife and beyond who are preparing for a powerful next era of life. My name is Amy A. Palmer. I am your host and facilitator for our conversations. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show. To stay connected, up to date, and to receive all of our free resources and gifts along the way, join us at community.blueprintbreakers.com. In this week's episode, The Healing Power of Breath, we explore a powerful tool for transformation and overcoming limiting beliefs, breathwork. Through this practice, today's guest, Suzanne Lederer, learned to embody her truths, release repressed emotions, and find a sense of peace within. Join us as we explore the profound impact of breathwork on her journey to healing and how it has allowed Suzanne to invite love, grace, and presence into every aspect of her life. Suzanne Lederer is a hypnotic breathwork facilitator and trauma-informed somatic breathwork practitioner. I think you're going to enjoy our conversation. Check out the show notes for more information about Suzanne and how to reach her. And we've also included a discount code for Blueprint Breakers listeners who would like to experience a breathwork session with Suzanne. Hello, Suzanne. Welcome to Blueprint Breakers. Good to see you today.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
I can't wait to hear all about the work that you're doing now, but also what brought you to this point. I feel like you have a really interesting and inspiring story to share. Why don't we start with, before we get into what you're doing like right now, maybe talk
Mhm.
a little bit about what did you do before and how and why did you make a pivot into the direction that you're going now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, I've always really loved helping people in some way get to the next level of their life. So, I've always come alongside people and have helped them figure out where they're stuck, roadblocks, and just kind of have I'm a huge encourager. And people find me really safe. A lot of people tell me often, like, I've never told anybody this before. And I'm like, yeah, I get that a lot. So I just feel like I have a relaxed presence and people feel safe with me. So before I started my own business, I was a business coach for real estate investors. I taught investors how to find, renovate, and flip houses. And I made the pivot, like a lot of people, at the end of 2020 when the company I was working for eliminated our position due to COVID and we're downsizing.
Mm.
Prior to this, I had been doing the three-part circular breath work that I do now for a couple years. And I was really amazed by the healing of my autoimmune condition. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition in 2010, and I couldn't get out of bed for 8 months and how I felt more in my body. I wasn't, swirling in my thoughts all the time. I was more present to life versus losing huge chunks of time. I was releasing past traumas. I do have sexual trauma in my past and just emotional abandonment. So I wasn't visiting those traumas again, but I was getting in touch with where it was living in my body, the sensations in my body, and letting it go through this specific breath work. And so when I lost my job, I really felt like I wanted to understand mental illness a little bit more. I wanted to understand trauma, the nervous system. So I took a 100-hour course in trauma recovery. And I became a breathwork facilitator during that time as well. So now I'm a trauma informed somatic, meaning breathwork based breathwork facilitator. And I went to talk therapy for years, which was super
Mm-hmm.
helpful to understand who I
Mm-hmm.
was and my limiting beliefs, protective mechanisms, all those things, and how I was wired. But I also needed the body based work, the somatic work to get the repressed emotions out that were really creating the havoc in my body and my mind and my soul. And I'm just amazed at how mental illness is really becoming more well known now, which I'm super excited about. And breath work, when I started breath work, gosh, now it's been, I think, 6 or 7 years. It was like people are like, what are you doing? No one had ever heard of the type of breath work that I now teach. So that's a little bit about the background.
Wow. So it started out, if I'm hearing you correctly, it started out that you were seeking answers for yourself. You were seeking some healing. You wanted to improve your health and your condition. So did you go down a lot of different paths before you found breath work, or
Yeah.
like what did that look like?
Yeah, really great question. So, yes, I'm like a person that, my father's very similar, but when I want to do something, I do it 100%. And so I
Mm-hmm.
just don't half in, half out. And so, like, if I wanted to quit smoking, I would just do it cold turkey. That's just what I do. So what happened is when I was diagnosed, I was told, get off gluten, get off dairy, all of the stuff, the diet, right? And I was a
Yep.
healthy eater and I'd always have been, and a huge exercise person. Like I did CrossFit and super had been doing sports since I was a child. So I did all the biohacks. So, right, I cleaned up my diet. I had cortisol fatigue and my cortisol was all messed up. So I had to stop doing CrossFit, which brought a lot of grief because that was my
Mm-hmm.
identity, right? Exercise was
Mm-hmm.
huge for me, relieving stress, all those things. So I had to stop doing that. And then obviously the sleep hacks and am I sleeping, the masks and, the red light. And so I was doing all these things. And so let's say I was here, not in, I couldn't get out of bed and I was moving to here, which is readmission of my healing, but I kept kind of running into a wall. And that's when
Mm-hmm.
I realized that it had to do with my nervous system. And I realized that when I first walked into my first yoga class, because I wasn't a yoga person. I was like, oh, that's a waste of time. I'm not going to get a
Mm-hmm.
workout. And so when I walked to my first yoga class, which really tapped into my nervous system, and I started bawling, I actually started crying in my first class. I was like, what the hell's going on? Like,
What's going on?
yeah, like this, I'm supposed to be, like stretching,
I'm
and
an athlete. I can do this.
yeah, yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so yeah. And I started doing restorative type yoga. I wasn't doing fast pace because my
Mm-hmm.
therapist was like, you need to do restorative and yen and all this stuff. So I was like laying there in yen and the tears were coming out. Well, that was because I was tapping into my body. So honestly, Amy, I was walking around with my head and my legs. I wasn't in touch with my
There's
body
no
whatsoever.
connection.
There's no connection. No, no.
Wow.
And so I look back at my childhood that I don't remember a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
was disassociated, right? I wasn't there because my body was protecting myself as a child. And so I don't remember my childhood. And what's really sad, I've been to over 35 countries and I don't remember a lot of them because I wasn't there. I was thinking about the next trip. I was thinking about the next place I was going to, right? And worrying about my flights and whatever the case may be that I wasn't there. And so
Mm.
it was very sad when I came to the understanding of what was happening.
Wow. I find it all fascinating. And when you first start describing it, I think to myself that it's almost like there's like a mind, heart, body, spirit connection thing happening. And then as you continue to talk about it, it also seems to be like it helps ground you to the moment, like helps you be present in the moment, right? And
Correct. Because if you're in fight or flight, which I can explain the autonomic nervous system if you want me to very quickly, but if you're in fight or flight or you're numbing yourself, you're not in the center, which is the window of tolerance, balanced, calm, present, you can't heal, right?
mhm,
So if I'm in high alert and I get triggered, I can't heal in that state. I'm going to be swirling, 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 right? In whatever's going on. And so I have to bring my nervous system down. Well, I didn't even understand the autonomic nervous system. I didn't understand the different states of that. And like I said, but that was a huge, huge piece for me, actually, of why I went into breath work and understanding the nervous system was super helpful because I'm a learner. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
understand something and have more knowledge around it, then I'm apt to move towards it, right? And really understand the window of tolerance. Well, what is that, right? And so it was super, super helpful to me for me to understand the autonomic nervous system and the states of my nervous system.
Wow. Okay. Would you describe yourself as like an analytical person that like is in your head a lot?
Mhm.
I ask this because when you first started exploring these things, did it strike you as a little woo woo and like the
Oh,
analytical person?
absolutely. Absolutely. I was like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And because I come from a very faith background,
Uh huh.
and so I was told for years that yoga, you don't go to yoga. Like yoga isn't for people like us. And so, absolutely, yes, I was very
So,
hesitant.
so that somehow being faith based or having a religion that's important to you was somehow disconnected from practices like that, like yoga and getting in touch with your
Yes,
body and those.
yes.
Okay. It's
Eastern religion.
interesting how we get to all these things, right?
It is insane. It's like, yeah. And so I was like, had it in my head or was told, oh, that's Eastern
Uh-huh.
religion and you shouldn't be doing that and this and
Got
that,
it.
right? And so
Okay.
then when I was like I said, my therapist was telling me you might want to do this. And then I stepped into my first class. I was like, you know what? You can bring thing that you believe you can bring with you. It's not like you
Right.
leave it on the shelf and then you go
Right.
somewhere. Right. And
Right.
so that's when I just was really like, I can bring what I believe anywhere that I go. And so
Mhm.
if I'm stepping into a class, so I was really, really glad that didn't hinder me from my healing.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, because it sounds like the breath work that was like the missing ingredient for you. Like
it was.
you had the diet, you had the exercise, you had all the things, but there was like this missing piece.
Yes, and it
You
was
know.
my nervous system, yes, and then it was
Right.
also my thoughts, right? Because I knew that I was worthy. I knew I was enough. I knew all these things, but it wasn't in my how could it be in my heart? How could I be embodying these things? Because I wasn't in my body,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so when I was on high alert, right? Because that's a high nervous system. When I was on high alert and I would, be set off by the barista, or I was driving in my car and I'd be like super yelling at people and anxious. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wasn't living out of the abundance of my heart, loving people and the compassion. I was told I was supposed to love people and be kind, but it was here. It wasn't coming flowing out of my heart. If that makes
Got it.
sense.
It does. It makes complete sense. So let's talk about it a little bit. Talk about breath work. Exactly like what is it and how does it
Mhm.
help?
Yeah, really good questions. Breathwork in general can change your autonomic nervous system state immediately. So let me explain that for a moment. We all have an autonomic nervous system. So it sends messages back and forth between your brain, your body, your organs, your spinal cord, your nerves, and it signals information of what to move forward to and what to move away from. So it coordinates our emotions, feelings, sensations in the body. So with the autonomic nervous system, we have three survival states that affect every one of us every single day. So you've probably heard of arousal. It's just like it sounds, hyper, which is being, fight or flight, high alert, anxious, worried, right? And then we have the hypoarousal, which is the ventral vagal, which is like the shutdown, the withdrawal, the depression, the disassociation, things like that. And then we have what I was kind of talking about a little earlier, which is the window of tolerance, which is the parasympathetic. So that's where you're grounded, you're connected, you're curious, present, calm, those types of things. So all of these survival states are important, right? So if I see a bear and I sense danger and I'm not safe, I'm going to respond by running. That's the fight or flight. And we need that. But I want you to hear me. It's when I'm in the chronic state of feeling unsafe. So I'm on high alert all the time, on edge, anxious, panic attacks, that it then becomes unhealthy and cause havoc in the body. And that's what was me. I can't heal when I'm in that constant state of survival mode. And I was very much like that, a perfectionist, a personality, very achievement oriented, right? To get my value. So this was my story, swinging from fight or flight and then maybe shutting down, right?
Mm.
Disassociating, like I said earlier, to
Mm-hmm.
protect myself. So I was very rarely present in the body. I was swirling in my thoughts, right? So that's when that happened in 2010, I believe, is when I became ill, that my body was just like, okay, I'm done. It's kind of like I want you to imagine a child, right? They're like, mom, mom,
Oh, yes.
mom, mom, and they start,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what my
Mm-hmm.
body was doing. It was giving me signals. I was fatigued. I had a thyroid condition, different things, but I wasn't listening. And so my body just basically shut down. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what happened in 2010. And like I was talking about earlier, I did a lot of things to help myself. But, the breath work, when I started doing breath work, is when what happened was is that helped me to calm my nervous system, because breath work takes you into the parasympathetic just by changing your breath. So all of these conditions aren't going away. I'm realizing that this way is a normal human response. Our emotions, it's normal to feel this way, but I also have to realize that I don't want it to take over my body.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I get myself into that calm state? Well, I can just manipulate my breath. So let's practice it for a moment, if you don't mind. So let's say I all of a sudden am triggered. So I'm way up here, maybe, and I want to get down here in the calm so I can respond versus react. Then what I can do is self soothe. So I want you to do this right now, Amy. Just put your hands wherever you feel drawn to around your body. So it could be here, your legs. So right now, I'm just telling you to put your hands on your body somewhere. That's really self-soothing, right? And then how I manipulate my breath, I can close my eyes or I can keep my eyes open. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to take deep breaths in through the belly. You want to activate the belly because you're wanting to activate the vagus nerve. If you want to Google that later, but you're wanting to activate that vagus nerve. So you're going to take a deep belly breath through the nose. So deep belly breath through the nose. Go ahead and do that. And then a really, really long exhale. So just keep in mind that if I want to bring my nervous system down, I need longer exhales. So I'm going to take a deep breath in, maybe like a 4 count, and then I'm going to take an 8 count out. So go ahead and do that a few times, Amy. Just taking in a 4 count and then taking an 8 count out, taking in a 4 count, taking in an 8 count out, maybe holding it at the top for a minute or two, 4 count in, 8 count out. And then when you're feeling done, you just kind of stop the breath and you just notice, am I feeling any different? Are you feeling more relaxed? Are you feeling more in your body? And so if I wanted to bring my system up, let's say I was numbing myself or I had depression, that's when you want to take a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. So there's different types of practices for that too, but
Mm.
that's just an example of manipulating your breath. So in the mornings when I wake up, I'm really, really tired. I'll do what's called Bostica breathing, which is very, very fast inhales and short exhales. So that's how you manipulate the breath. So you tell me, Amy, do you feel any different?
I do. I feel more relaxed and just comfortable in my chair. Like I feel different in my chair, oddly
Yes.
enough.
Yes. Yeah, because you are seeing all the connection points, right,
Mm-hmm.
on your chair. So when you're in that state that you just described, that calm, that natural state, right? When you're in that state, then you can make a decision from your heart versus here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Oh, this person, why did they say that? They must not like me. And you have and create all these stories because I'm really high. But if I bring myself down and actually get in my heart and go, you know what? They're just being human. Maybe something was going on with them. right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I can actually, be more of an empathetic state versus it's all about me.
Mm.
Now, the one, the practice that I teach, the breath work that I teach a 3-part circular breath work. So it's a faster breath practice. It's all through the mouth. So it drops you into the body faster. It's big inhales into the belly, into the chest, and out. We do this over and over for 20 minutes, bringing lots of oxygen in our body. And this removes energetic blockages in the body. It relieves and removes repressed emotions from trauma of our childhood and allows healing emotionally, physically, and mentally. So, as a child, let's say I don't know, 5 years old, and my father walks in and he starts yelling and screaming at me. Am I, as a 5-year old, be able to say, "Oh, my dad's had a really bad day. It has nothing to do
Right,
with me"? Absolutely not,
right,
right? So
right.
I internalize I'm not enough. Why doesn't he love me? I'm unlovable, etc. And then I walk around with this and it goes into my adulthood. This is stuck in my body. Gorbe Mate talks a lot about repressed emotions stuck in the body, right? He believes mental illness, ADHD, is because of that reason. So the breath work that I teach gets out those emotions and out that trauma. And that's where it really was transformational for me. So breathwork had a twofold. One, it got me in my body, right? We're talking about my nervous system. It helped me to understand fight or flight. I am very conscious of what's happening now in my body. I bring my body down like we just did in just a moment. They're called regulation tools. I have a slew of regulation tools that I do all day long. So I have those, but then I also did the 3-part breath, and this powerful breath work practice helped get the emotions and stuckness out of my body. So then the window of tolerance, which I named earlier, it widens the window of tolerance. So, what that means is your nervous system is healing and it has more resilience out in the world. So, things don't affect me as much. I'm not on high alert all the time. And when something happens, my nervous system is healed so much that it doesn't wreak havoc for days and hours and etc. because I've widened my window of tolerance. If that makes
Well,
sense.
and it does. And getting to that point in this day and age is quite an accomplishment because everything is built out there to keep us on high alert. And
Oh, absolutely. We don't live in caves anymore, right? It's like our phones, uh,
everything.
cars, driving in a car. Everything is constantly setting us off. So you're right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem with people. Most people meditate in the morning or do their morning practice, and then they go into their day and they don't do anything else. If you don't interrupt your day, you're going to be on autopilot 95% of the time. So you're not
Mm,
going to be able to heal. I
yeah.
talk to my clients about you have to disrupt your day. You have to become conscious. You have to build a lifestyle of healing if you want to heal. And so I help them see that and that me and you and everybody else out there, we're our greatest healers. I can't go to a therapist and be healed necessarily. They can support me, they can give me the tools, but if I am not doing the work on a daily basis, I'm not going to change. It's going to be very micro. It's going to be very, very hard to change.
I'm having some major ahas here, Suzanne. I mean, because I also have some significant trauma in my past that I've had a lot of therapy around and wonderful help and support and
Yeah,
all the things. And I feel
absolutely.
like I felt like I've gotten down to, like, using a football analogy, like to the 20-yard line, or the
Yeah.
30, like I haven't quite, like, there's a missing thing. And I do remember one of my therapists actually suggesting that I was still holding some of the trauma physically in my body.
Yep.
And I didn't really understand what that really means, but it sounds like this would be like could be a key ingredient in that.
Absolutely, 100%. So, I would love anybody, if they want to check out my website, I would love to support anyone on that healing journey, but it doesn't necessarily have to be me. I would say you need to seek out a somatic therapist, someone who is
So many
going
therapists.
to do body work. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, 100%.
But you support clients in person, individually, in groups.
Mhm.
online? Tell us all the ways that you work.
Yeah, a really great question. So I do group classes at yoga studios. I do hypnotic breath work. It's a
Mhm.
little different of a practice. So I am trained in hypnosis, but because to be honest, when you're doing this type of breath work, it actually brings you into the subconscious and it starts rewiring your brain. So when I
Mhm.
start telling you things, you're actually receiving it because you're breathing and you're getting into your body. That's why I think breath work is really critical to somatic therapy because you have to open yourself up, and breathwork is one, in my opinion, a huge critical piece. And you have to activate the vagus nerve, and there's very small ways of doing that. And one way is breathwork, and your vagus nerve is at the bottom of your belly, and it goes up into your organs, into your neurons in your brain. But so again, you can look that up if you want more information on the science behind that. But so I do group classes and then I do private practices. Yes, I do online. I have people all over. I do it in person in my home. It's funny because people come to my house and they're coming quite far, maybe like 45 minutes. Something happens where they can't come to my house. And so I say, well, let's just do it in your home. And then they end up continue doing it in their home because they feel more
Mm.
safe in their home and it
Mhm.
just they like doing it in their home. So yes, you can do it anywhere and it's a beautiful practice. And then I also teach a workshop on the nervous system. So it's
Mhm.
called Learn to Heal Your Nervous System, setting yourself free, basically. And so I talk about what I kind of did today a little bit more in depth, why we're doing the things we're doing from our childhood, why we're programmed a certain way, how we can heal. And so I introduce different regulation tools in that workshop that people can take home immediately. So I don't do the workshop online yet. I only do that in person in San Diego, but I do that. And then I do a couple other workshops, like I'm doing a grief workshop right now, um, navigating grief and loss. Again,
Mhm.
most people don't
Mhm.
even know how to grieve. And so
Mhm.
I want to really teach people how to grieve. I lost my mother 5 months ago. And to be honest, I don't really think people know how to grieve. I mean,
Mhm.
when you lose something like that, it's a different ballgame when it comes to grief.
Yeah.
So I was so thankful for the skills that I had. And so I really want to help people with that. And then I am doing a retreat next year in Prescott and I'm teaming up with another woman. She's a doll. She has gone through a lot of trauma and is all the yoga side of it and all of
Mhm.
that. So we're teaming up. She's doing a lot of the meditation and yoga, and I'm doing all the breath work. And then
Mhm.
I love movement. So we're going to be doing dance, we're going to be hiking, kayaking. So I love adventure too. So that's going to be at the end of May of next year. So anybody can go on that. And that's on my website.
Fabulous. So I'll make sure to put a link to your website in the show notes of this
Okay.
episode.
Okay.
And
Fantastic.
and you also offered a gift for a private session for anybody listening to this episode. We'll include a code, like a discount code in the show notes where they could get 10% off a private session.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can just book it right on online. If there's not a time that works for you because of time change or whatever the case may be, just reach out to me. But yeah, you
Uh-huh.
can book it straight online on my
That's
website.
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. All right. So I'll make sure that we've got all that listed in the show notes. Before we wrap, I would love to hear your thoughts on, you and I have had like some sidebar conversations about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And you are definitely a blueprint breaker. I mean, I'm sure the listeners can tell that already. Just the fact that you've pivoted off a career into this practice and serving people in this way make you a
Mhm.
blueprint breaker. I'd love to
Yeah.
hear any thoughts on that and any recommendations you have about like your specific lifestyle.
Yeah. One thing when you had asked that question, one thing I was struggling with was to find meaning and fulfillment in my life because I was looking outside myself, right? I, again, was an activator. I was perfectionist, a personality. I really cared what people thought of me. I really was struggling with thinking if I was enough. So my circumstances, people, finances, I have a huge money story. So many things dictated how I was feeling
Mm,
versus my internal. So I did not know how to be with my strong emotions. I was a very sensitive person and had a sensitive heart, and I didn't know how to be with that. So I numbed a lot. And I knew in my heart, like I said earlier, that I was worthy and enough, but I really wanted to embody that I was enough, that I'm worthy of love, that I'm worthy of abundance. I've never been married. And so that had a huge speaking in my false self in, critical voice. That's why you're not
Mhm.
married, because you're not worthy of love, especially because, like I said earlier, my father. Also, I have a Jewish heritage. So I really believe that I didn't belong here. And that was very ingrained, actually. That was a root thing going on there. So breath work helped me not just know these truths in my head, but really embodying them, bringing these limiting beliefs into my wholeness. So I really learned to allow emotions to surface, to feel all the unmet needs and expectations, right? And with present awareness, because I wasn't aware before, right? But through regulation tools that I taught myself and I practiced, I was
Mhm.
calm in my nervous system. So I can invite God's supernatural love and grace to all parts of me and things that I was struggling with, and bringing them into my wholeness and fullness of who I really am today. So that's really where I really want to leave people with, is that emotions are tough and they're hard to be with. And we're never going to be void of them. This is a human experience. And I just look at it as energy now and really am allowing myself to be with it, especially with my mother, right? I had so much grief, so much anger, and I was hitting pillows and screaming, because that's a really great way of getting things out through my regulation tools. So I feel like if I can leave anybody with anything, that you have to take ownership of your healing. You really do. And once I decided to do that, that's when a lot of breakthroughs came through and I got to really step into my wholeness of who I really am.
That's beautiful. Very well said. And kudos to you for making such a journey. I mean, that
Mhm.
it takes a lot to get there. So I
It
appreciate you
does.
and celebrate you for doing that. So thank you for so much for sharing everything with us today. And it was great
Yeah.
talking with you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here. And I just want to leave with everyone that just normalize it, right? We
Yeah.
want to stay in the familiar. We want to stay stuck. Our body and mind wants to keep us stuck. And so, yes, it is a fight to travel and move a different direction. So, know that when you keep getting pulled back, which I do every day, just normalize it, normalize your
Yeah.
ego, normalize all of it, because it really helps you to then keep moving.
I love that. Thank you,
Thanks,
Suzanne.
Amy. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Amy. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of the Blueprint Breakers podcast, The Healing Power of Breath. And a special thank you to Suzanne Lederer for bringing her expertise and her knowledge and her experience to us in our healing journey and helping us with our transformation as we move forward into this next era of life. And for you, thank you for listening. Thank you for your 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. And thank you for sharing this episode with your friends. If you have not yet joined our Blueprint Breakers gift list, please join us, community.blueprintbreakers.com. This is where I share additional resources and free items and a deeper dive on important topics. So again, that's community.blueprintbreakers.com. Have a great week. Keep on breaking those blueprints and writing your own.